Welcome to another episode of the Distributed Data Show, brought to you by DataStax Academy, where we bring you the latest news and interview technical experts to help you succeed at building large-scale distributed systems.
Welcome to 2018. The Distributed Data Show is back for another year of talking about distributed systems, and hopefully we'll have many news and developments and surprises in store for you in this new year. I'm Jeff Carpenter. I'm live in the studio today with Luke Tillman, is remote.
Hello, friends.
And also joining us from across the nation, it's David Gilardi.
Hello. Hello.
Well, okay, so guys, new year, new possibilities, new technology. I want you to put your prognosticator hats on. I don't know what a prognosticator hat looks like, but it might look something like what David is wearing right now. And put those hats on and tell us what you think.
I just want to point out that I'm the only one actually wearing a hat.
I'm wearing a metaphorical hat. So with that being said, I think we should maybe let Luke have the first shot at what's on your mind for 2018.
So I'm going to do my best to try and not embarrass myself on this episode. First of all, I just want to put that out there. So we're making technology predictions for 2018. The one sort of two related things that I kind of see as trends going on. First of all, sort of the continued rise of the service mesh. So this is kind of a technology that's been around for a little while now, has really started to mature. If anybody's out there listening and you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, if you want to go kind of do some Googling and kind of like see a couple of examples, a couple of projects. Linkerd has been around for a while. That's a Scala project kind of built on Finagle and some other stuff from the Twitter folks. And then you have Envoy, which was sort of a C++ project, I think, from the folks at Lyft Engineering. And so that's, I think, over the last year or so, leading into 2018, seen a big uptick in adoption. You get a lot of kind of cool things, patterns and things like circuit breaker and kind of stuff that you would normally see in a microservices deployment, along with service discovery and all kinds of other cool features. And so I think you're going to see a continued rise of that sort of technology and adoption of that technology, and maybe even a little bit of like some service mesh wars going on. Like, so you kind of saw, like somebody on Twitter called it the service mesh wars the other day. And I was like, I don't know if there's really a war going on, but so you did see like a brand new one towards the end of 2017 get released from, I think the organization was called Buoyant. And they have a new service mesh written in Rust called Conduit. So like you're still seeing alternative projects kind of come up in this space. So that's sort of an interesting thing. And it's going to be interesting to kind of watch how that plays out, I think, over the next year.
I'm not sure I'd want to write my Conduit with Rust just because, those two words, the play between them, I think it's a little funny anyway.
It's actually Rust is a whole other topic that we could spend a little bit of time with Firefox, and like Mozilla inventing that programming language, and now like Firefox coming out and it being such a big deal, and it'd be interesting to see what happens with Rust as a programming language over the next year as well as a random aside. Nice. But so I think service mesh, and then I also think I think you guys probably touched on it in the year in review episode for 2017. So you've seen sort of Kubernetes kind of, win for lack of a better term.
We may have said that, yes.
Did you? Yeah, did you? So Kubernetes has really seen some pretty widespread adoption as far as the orchestration space goes. And so you kind of started to see these technologies kind of converge or win, or kind of, like people, like some of the larger companies kind of settle on, okay, this is sort of the way forward in these various spaces. And so I think what you're going to see is sort of the search for the higher level abstraction above, these lower level building blocks for microservices architectures and microservice deployments. So a good example of a project I think that's trying to do that right now is Istio. That's ISTIO if you want to go and Google and look them up. And they're kind of trying to fit these different pieces together. So, you've got maybe Kubernetes for the orchestration piece and Envoy as the proxy. And, you need to do, say, common thing like certificate rotation of your SSL certificates, and kind of trying to fit together these kind of lower level components into a higher level abstraction that people can use to actually build microservices deployments and kind of make it easier. Because, while we've kind of settled on some of the lower level building blocks, I don't think, Kubernetes is going to be the be all end all sort of control plane for this, or, that kind of thing. So I think I don't know if Istio is going to be the thing, or if it's going to be, there'll be some other projects that come out, but I think you're going to start to see this trend towards, okay, well, what's the next level up? Because, as developers and engineers, we love abstractions. So.
And sometimes they're even useful and not just for the sake of abstraction.
Yeah, exactly.
I resemble that.
DSLs for the win. Anyway, sorry.
Nice. And I think what you're saying is true, Luke, about Istio. I had sort of seen that start to emerge in the later months of 2017 as kind of like an early leader in that category, as something that really kind of fit that space in around what Kubernetes was giving you with in terms of scheduling. But then, there's still this component that we need with respect to ideas like circuit breakers and also traffic routing, which is a great enabler for being able to do A/B deployments and more kind of continuous delivery types of solutions. And then this conduit project popped up, and I was like, oh, okay, so we may have a little bit of give and take. So this will be a fun area to watch.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they haven't, while early on, at least with Istio, they've kind of settled on some of the leaders in the space. They do kind of mention that they're meant to be an abstraction, and so for example, if you don't want to use Kubernetes, if you want to use something like Mesos as your sort of orchestration or resource management kind of layer, you may see plugins and things to support sort of other underlying kind of pieces of that ecosystem. So Pivotal Cloud Foundry, for example, as your orchestration framework instead of Kubernetes. Although even Pivotal is like, they have Pivotal Kubernetes service. So Kubernetes is really like eating the world as far as that space goes. So I know.
Yeah, there really is sort of this mix and match type of behavior going on. And I think it's even really interesting how the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is accepting multiple projects that do equivalent functionality. They're just kind of letting it all incubate and seeing what rises to the top. And, maybe there is a place for multiple of these frameworks. All right, so I'm going to take a turn here and talk about a 2018 trend that I see emerging. And we started to see the beginnings of this in 2017 in terms of companies adopting not just one cloud provider, but multiple cloud providers. And of course, we've historically had a lot of companies keeping certain things on premises. But now we are seeing companies that are clients of multiple clouds, and the different cloud providers are differentiating themselves based on kind of more value-added services on top of the core infrastructure that they're providing. So one of the things that I think there is a big need for is if I do make this choice, let's say as an enterprise architect, that I'm going to deploy and I'm going to deploy my services in multiple clouds, and I'm going to make use of managed services from multiple cloud providers. How am I really going to stay on top of all of that and really understand, where all my data is and where all my business capabilities are and which of them are up, and sort of managing the relationship between all of this stuff? It might be easy for me to say, okay, I'm going to run all my operational stuff in one cloud. And then, dump a bunch of data. I'm on AWS. I'm going to dump a bunch of stuff in S3 buckets, and then I'm going to use maybe Google's AI, machine learning kind of stuff on top of that. And maybe that makes sense. But the dividing lines, I think, or the boundaries aren't going to always be so clean.
Yeah, I think it kind of ties in even to the point we were just talking about, sort of that next layer abstraction. What are people that don't want to standardize on a single cloud vendor, or don't want to do vendor lock-in, and want to do multi-cloud, what's going to be the piece of technology that sort of enables them, or what are the pieces of technology that are going to enable them to do that?
And I don't have a name for it yet. Maybe we should make one up.
There are some stuff out there, that kind of multi-cloud abstractions, but I don't know what it is that's going to win.
Well, David, I know you have some thoughts about this area as well.
Oh, well, mine really get into, going to the question of what are we going to do with all this data, right? Some of the emerging trends, like some of the stuff we've had some hot movement this year with regard to like machine learning, and that some of the machine learning algorithms are particularly data hungry, and now, right, that we've had this emergence of all this just huge amounts of data. That has kind of enabled that to kind of move forward, and that ties into AI. Like for decades, we've been talking about AI, always AI, but it never really has started to emerge. And now you see a lot more complex algorithms for machine learning that are coming out. A lot more use of machine learning in all sorts of different areas. Like I'm thinking automated cars, for one, automated driving, that kind of deal. There are other areas. Lots of the conferences I've been to this year, I've seen almost always there's some talk on machine learning somewhere, right? And I think we've finally hit a threshold where that's actually going to really start to take off more than what we've seen before. And then something that's kind of related to that, or will be potentially in part of the future, and part that gets me like really excited, is quantum computing. So for the longest time, this has been theoretical, totally theoretical stuff, right? It is happening. It is absolutely happening. There are a whole set of vendors right now that even have like, a handful of qubits processors that they have. And what's kind of funny is a lot of them right now, the processors are really, really tiny, but they have like a whole room that looks like some of the old supercomputers that's all for the cooling of these. A lot of them are being cooled now to almost absolute zero. But all of that, the whole point is that it's actually happening. There are real quantum computers that are starting, that are being produced, that are being used, and that capability is looking in 2018 to like really jump from having maybe a handful of qubits to having maybe 20 or 50 or something like that on a single processor. So that's, I think, another area that's going to be awesome.
Nice. Well, we haven't given you a chance, David, to share kind of one of your own. I know you were just kind of riffing off of my idea before. So let's allow you to start from scratch. The field is green. It's 2018. What do you think the big trend of 2018 is?
Well, let's see. If we're going to start from scratch 2018, well, this is going to sound a little old hat maybe, and I'm a previous operations guy, so this is kind of like one of those things that I have a kind of a kindred relationship with, if you will. But for a while now, we've seen the emergence of containers and things, containerized services and such like that, things like Docker, and not only that, you have things, managed cloud services, right, where there's a lot of these white glove services that are essentially, they're going to manage all of your cloud needs for you, and so on and so forth. And what that's done is kind of taken, I think, the pitch I've heard anyway, a lot of businesses is you no longer need operations, right? You don't need these folks. We'll do all this for you. But I think what we might start to see is, I think that's going to start to move back. And I think we're going to see some of the need for operations and operations people come back, because at the end of the day, and I know this, at least for me personally, in the things that I'm working on as a developer, right? It's great to have these systems where I can just spin up, a whole service implementation, but I still need to be able to see what's going on when I'm coding, when I'm testing, when I'm trying to, kind of improve or enhance performance, things like that. I still need visibility. I have to see what's going on. I've got to have some of the knowledge of what's going on there in the operational level. So I actually think we're going to see like kind of a push back to maybe old hat operations type needs, but stacked on top of the tech, the new tech, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, David. I think that the nature of what those operations engineers are doing is going to start to change, and it's not going to be on the level of managing individual instances so much anymore. We've already started to move away from that quite a bit. But more, like you're saying, to kind of seeing what the overall trends are, just at a higher level of abstraction. Once again, abstraction.
And to that point, what you were just saying there about no longer being on like the level of managing individual instances, I think you're absolutely right. There are more and more services out there now where we are talking about hundreds or thousands of devices that may be in a cluster or something like that. you can't possibly go and manage every single one of those individual devices or nodes or whatever. And the scale at which these are really starting to push into is just going to change. I think you're right. It's going to change the nature of operations and what that means.
I think the name of the game, though, is probably, like, just to refine your point a little bit, like, not to co-opt your point, but
please do. I can always use refining.
But I think the keyword you used was visibility, and I always like to say observability, right? So I think that's still going to be the name of the game, and hopefully that's the trend we see as more and more sort of observability. So as a developer or as an ops person, whether I specialize in writing code or whether I specialize in the system side of things, or whether I'm somewhere in the middle. Observability is the biggest thing, what's being able to see what's going on my systems.
Right.
Thank you for making my point better than I did.
and observability, and just to unpack what that really means, or at least where I hope we're going, is really that ability to correlate cause and effect of different symptoms that we might be observing at different layers of our stack, and to really tie those all together and really say, this slowness that you're observing on the website, well, the root cause of that is threefold, and these are the three factors that are really contributing together to produce that slowness. Just for an example, like if we can get to that level of observability, so not just looking at log data, but again, beginning to apply some of this machine learning technology to really, the last time you had this problem, it was these factors that were involved. You might want to, again, look in these areas. That's going to be really super helpful. One of the things that we tend to do, this being the distributed data show, is that we do talk a lot about the data tier, although we've spent a lot of time today kind of pushing up into that service tier of our applications. But let's open up the aperture a little bit. What technologies are out there that are really coming to the forefront in 2018?
All right, so I'm going to jump in. I want to give the front end side of things a little bit of love, because they are absolutely part of, when you're building a distributed system, the client totally counts, right?
Oh yeah.
So, so one thing that I think is really interesting to watch and kind of exciting is, so towards the end of 2017, you finally saw the browser vendors standardize on WebAssembly. So WebAssembly, if you're out there listening and you don't know what I'm talking about, you can think like assembly language, like you might be familiar with, sort of a binary format, from your server-side code days. But this is one that can run in a browser, right? So this is one that can run in any of the major web browsers. And so the idea is to be able to take C or C++ or Rust. Right now also is another, Rust came up again here, but those three languages are kind of supported for sure right now, and be able to compile those into assembly that can then run in a web browser. And it kind of opens the door to all kinds of super interesting, kind of native, like you can actually get sort of native performance in a web browser. So it opens the door to all kinds of super interesting, like visualizations and CPU intensive tasks and, things that essentially you couldn't do with just JavaScript before in a web browser. You're basically going to be able to call these native modules, from HTML and JavaScript code, and it really opens the door to all kinds of interesting possibilities, maybe more native type experiences. So I know a lot of people have been kind of predicting maybe this might be the beginning of the end for the native app, mobile app experience, because the mobile web will actually maybe be able to compete finally with that sort of fluid experience that you're used to getting from a native app. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think you're going to see a really big explosion of sort of new uses and new maybe frameworks or something. It'll be interesting to watch and see if you see other languages come along. So right now, you can do C, C++, and Rust. It'll be interesting to see if you get maybe cross-compiling from other languages that already have a VM. So for example, Java with the JVM or C# with the CLR, whether or not you'll see them do some sort of attempt to bring the VM sort of along into the into the WebAssembly world, or if you'll see some sort of compatibility shim where you can write code in the language, but they don't actually bring the virtual machine along. They figure out some sort of compatibility shim that kind of gives you the same thing when you're running in Chrome V8 or whatever. So I don't know. It's going to be a really interesting space to watch with the WebAssembly stuff over the next year.
I didn't even know this was a thing until you just started talking about it. I feel like we've come full circle now, and we're going to be at conferences again with guys talking hex to each other, right? And just it feels like it's just, I think we've made some kind of like tech loop that has spanned decades or something, and it finally just looped back on itself. I wonder if this is where the repeat's going to be.
See, my conspiracy theory, because it is one of these preview episodes, I feel like I need to throw in a conspiracy theory. So what do you think about WebAssembly as a major enabling technology for crypto jacking? I'm thinking I have even less ability to see what this code I downloaded is doing in my browser now that it's all this binary WebAssembly stuff. What's it really doing? Is it mining digital currencies? Who knows? I don't know what it's doing anymore.
Well, they do say that one of the things is being able to essentially do the same thing you could do now in your browser and do a view source and be able to see all of the code. So but yeah, I don't know. You're right. I mean, people are already doing that with like mining Bitcoin and stuff in the browsers. So.
I guess that's happening with JavaScript. So
exactly. And so, guys, I just want to throw this out there as one more prediction, because I know we're getting ready to wrap up. I think this is finally the year of Linux on the desktop. I know we've been saying this for years.
I thought you were going to say something about the Browns. I was sure that it was going to be about the Browns.
It's funny though. The year of Linux on the desktop is happening because Microsoft started really putting a lot of effort into Windows subsystem for Linux. And so the year of Linux on the desktop is actually when you have a Windows machine and you're running Windows subsystem.
I'll believe you when they bring Enlightenment. All right. When Enlightenment comes back and it's on all of the different OS platforms, I'll agree.
Nice. Well, I can tell that we're about to spiral out of control. So this might be a good time for us to bring this episode to a close. We're interested in your thoughts about what do you think are the big trends of 2018. So make sure that you can follow up with us in comments on YouTube or join us in our DataStax Academy Slack. We have a distributed data showroom all set up there. What are the topics that you want to hear about in 2018? Help us help you. Thanks for joining us, and until next time.
Thank you for joining us again for the Distributed Data Show. We love your feedback, so go to the Distributed Data Show page on DataStax Academy and tell us what you think. You can also find us on the DataStax Academy YouTube channel, or find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get great podcasts. While you're there, make sure and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.